Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to use the cross-hatching technique in order to draw this stone texture. And so one thing that I want to make clear is that the printout for this image actually came out to be a little um, more blurry than the original, and I do apologize. So we're going to make the best with what we have. All that said, I think it would be really great and probably easiest for all of us if we started with the very first top stone. So this one right here being this one over here, we can tell that the bottom portion is a lot darker than the front face. And we can see that over here, this side is slightly darker, but not as dark as this bottom one and not as light as this front face. So we know that this is going to go from darker to slightly less dark to slightly less dark again. And so as you remember, the cross hatching technique is lines that basically overlap one another. And so the really dark areas are going to have multiple lines. The really light areas, so the really light areas have less lines. Okay, so dark areas, light areas. With that said, we're going to start with this bottom portion here. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn my paper slightly, and I'm just going to go ahead and start adding these hatching lines first. Now that we got them this way, I'm going to go ahead and start adding them this way. And so now it's getting darker. And now it's this way. Okay. Over here, I'm going to add just like that. And then on this side, I'm going to add a lot of just hatching lines, super lightly. And then for each edge of the rock, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of outline slightly, just so that we can see that that is the bottom. Okay, we can also see that right at the top there's like little grass or little like rubbish, right? And so what we can do is we can actually use the hatching lines to create that effect too. And they're slightly curved, and that's totally fine. Over here we might need to just add a few more lines to make it slightly darker. And so just like with the hatching, all of these lines, they're not going to be super straight. They're going to be slightly curved because we are making organic forms. So we're going to have that kind of organic, more natural feel to it. With that said, I think it would be even easier for us to kind of tackle this one here. And so we notice that it's a little bit darker on this side than it is on the front face. So we're going to go in and we're going to start adding those first hatching lines. I'm going to start going in the opposite direction. Okay, right here we need it slightly darker so we can see the difference between both of these rocks. Okay, right here on this rock, we actually see a few indentations, and one of these kind of got slightly erased, so I'm going to bring it back. We can see this slight little line here. Okay, so we see it slightly, okay, slight. The reason we can see this line is because there's a shadow right underneath it. Now, when we're drawing these shadows in the cross-hatching technique, okay, and I'm going to get super close here. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to slowly add some of those hatching lines underneath, and then we cross them. Okay, that way when we're looking at our image from further away, it starts to get that indentation, the same one that we see over here. So up close it's going to look freaky. a little bit further away, it's going to look a little more realistic. Okay, and then there is one line here, here, and the whole thing is going to have very light hatching lines. So it's really lightly drawn. And then here on these undersides, we're going to add some more lines just to get that effect. And I'm also going to bring some hatching lines over to this side too. That way we're truly using that hatching technique. And then you guys can even go as far as using your cotton swab and lightly just kind of blending it, but we can still see basically the line work. So it's still the hatching technique. It's now also slightly blended because we do see some blending going on, right? Everything is kind of in the gray tone here. Okay, we can even go as far as using the residue to kind of color in the rest of this in that slight gray before we start adding that hatching technique. So going in and adding that slight gray. And then once everything is in that gray tone, then we go in and we look at the really, really dark areas. So over here, this is slightly darker. We do see this kind of like, here, I'm gonna move this slightly so we can see it better. Right, we see this kind of slight line, then there's this one, and then there's one over here because we're seeing the edge of the rock. Okay, and so anyway, all of the darker areas seem to be right here where like the rocks meet, right? So then over here, this area here. Okay, then we see right here, there's a bunch of hatching lines this way. Then there's that, there's that. So I'm adding these lines right here that I'm seeing. Right here in this area, it gets kind of slightly darker. So you know what, this, so I'm just going in and I'm just coloring all the areas that are supposed to be slightly darker. And then right here we see kind of like a bush area, right? Kind of like little leaves. Right, we see them here. So it's just a bunch of hatching lines, one on top of the other. I'm going to move this right here so that we can slightly see it better. And so we are kind of able to see the start of this here. Okay. And like I might even, this part right here, extend this out because it is supposed to be slightly darker. This is attached to that side. And so just adding those hatching lines in order to create that dimension. And so this is undone, but we now are seeing, okay, this is where we're adding those hatching lines.